Hey guys, it's Zach with Blade HQ. We're here at SHOT Show 2018, and I'm sitting here with the man, the myth, the legend, Lucas Burnley. How you doing today, man?
How's it going, Zach?
Good, good.
Yeah, man.
And we're here to talk about a new knife that he has coming out. It's kind of a collab, Boker ProTech collab type thing.
Yeah.
This is what it looks like. But before we get there, let's talk about where it came from first.
All right.
So yeah,
Good.
so tell us. So what is this?
So this is the Kwaiken, and this is a little bit of the lineage that's kind of been, in the design process. I think we did the first Kwaiken folder with Boker about 8 or 9 years ago.
Okay.
The design originally was something that I did for myself. It was a fixed blade, basically a little 7-inch kind of utility defensive folder.
Totally.
Carried inside the waistband.
And that's kind of where that word comes from as well, right? Because I've heard it Kwaiken, I've heard it Kwaiken.
Yeah, and Kwaiken too is another one without the W.
Okay, perfect. And where does the name come from? I'm about words and names. Where does the name come from?
So essentially, it's almost like Kwaiken is almost essentially like saying Bowie.
Okay.
It's more of a grouping than
like a style kind of.
Yeah, kind of like a process. So originally, Kwaikens were like an 8 to 10 inch blade or around that range, carried inside of the kimono.
Okay. So Japan.
Yeah, they're Japanese in origin, and ultimately it was kind of a commoner's knife, like a usable knife.
Right on.
My Kwaiken probably doesn't have anything in terms of stylistic similarities.
Yeah.
But for me, it was the carry method. When I first designed it, I basically designed it to be carried on a ripcord tucked inside the waistband, and it just kind of fit the bill of like it had the Japanese cord wrapping, and it was carried inside.
Cool.
And so Kwaiken really fit the bill.
Awesome.
And yeah, basically I made that for a few years, and when I originally talked with Boker about doing a project, they were interested in that fixed blade. At that point, we had a hard time figuring out how to do the cord wrapping.
Okay.
And they brought the idea of doing a folder. At that point, I think I had made one folder. It was so far outside of my wheelhouse, and to this day, the Kwaiken has been the most complicated thing I've ever designed.
Okay, yeah.
Partially because of my design skills at that time, but also just because everything that makes the Kwaiken kind of clean and simple is what makes it complicated from a design standpoint.
For sure.
The blade closing fully inside the handle, everything being really linear. You still have to have the stop pin geometry and detent, everything has to fit.
It's funny how things that look so simple usually are the most complicated.
Yeah, that's the irony, is simple isn't.
Yep.
Like when it comes to design, it takes a lot of work to get back to simple.
Totally.
So yeah, this was essentially the first version of the Kwaiken that we did. When I originally designed it, I hadn't done any flippers. And so I basically went with, a standard one-hand opening, thumb disc.
Yeah.
The goal at that time was to keep it super, super clean. I wanted something that, at that point, I was doing a lot of kind of self-defense training, and so one of the things that I always realized, like, people get very weapon focused, and so you draw a knife and your first thought goes to opening the knife.
Right.
When in reality, you already have a tool in your hand, and so I made it kind of fit this idea of I could get it out, and then I already have a solid
a fist
tool.
pack,
like a Kubotan.
Kubotan.
The design was never intended to be weaponized,
for sure.
But because of kind of my interest at the time, and to this day, I've always looked at knives in that standpoint.
For sure, yeah.
So the thought process went into it.
Cool. Right on, yeah, I like that.
Yeah, so we had pretty good success with that first one, and that was my first factory collaboration. So really exciting, and we learned a lot because the same reason that it's simple and hard to design. This as a custom requires me to do some tweaking to small details to keep everything to where it's the tip's fully enclosed and the edge isn't too close to the back. Going to production, the scale increases.
Right.
And so what happens is any small tolerance that changes, it's a problem. And so there was a lot of back and forth with Boker, and the nice thing with Boker is that through those problems, we've developed a really strong working relationship.
Awesome.
Where we kind of I can bring them and say, this is a problem, and they'll say, okay, how do we fix it, or what do we do?
Yeah. Awesome. That's great.
So,
that's super great. So that's the original, and then where did that take us?
So pretty quickly after I did the first variation, and I was making it as a custom, I was looking at it, and I wanted it to be cleaner.
Okay.
And I realized, like, okay, like, you make something clean by, like, what you take away from it.
Right.
So I'm like, okay, what can I take away? So I take away the thumb disc. But how do we open it? Okay, so I look and I start to play with the flipper. And at that time, for me, I wasn't a huge fan of flippers just because a lot of times they were huge. The tab was huge.
Right, you get
really
that big pull-out tab, yeah.
Exactly. And so I worked really hard to get the geometry right so that I could use the smallest flipper tab as possible.
Awesome.
Basically.
And when you're doing that, when you were working on this, are you doing it in CAD or are you doing it by hand? Like,
so at this point,
trial and error?
So I've never considered myself a designer. Like, I'm a knife maker.
Yeah.
You know, I started making knives on my porch with like files and like a gas torch.
Right on.
And so at this point, I did not know CAD. I was manually prototyping every part.
Wow,
yeah, and CAD for a design like this actually really helps because you're able to test all of it. This was just trial and error.
Right.
So yeah.
Having built a couple things in my day, I can I feel you.
Yeah, I struggled to do these.
Yeah.
But yeah, so once we did the flipper, I feel like it's really when the Kwaiken as a design, both in my custom line and for Boker, like really started to hit its stride.
Cool. Awesome. That's great.
It was just that action. Like, people loved it.
Yeah. And then that led into kind of some variations here, right?
Right,
and then that leads us into that smaller variation as well, right?
Yeah, so Kwaiken, while being very slim and easy to carry, is still a big knife. Like, when you look at a 3.5-inch blade, I mean,
for sure.
It's in your pocket.
Yeah.
And so we were trying to figure out a way, like, we did variations that made it lighter, you know, so it's like carbon fiber version, like, great, but it's still, especially if you're not a knife person, and you have the knife, it feels like, you're like, wow, it's like a knife.
Like I have a thing.
Yeah, I think most of us are just like, whatever you want in your pocket is not too big.
Totally.
Right? So we started playing around with the idea of doing like a mini version.
Okay.
So as far as like design lineage, basically the three biggest steps were the original from the fixed blade,
right,
moving into the flipper, and then flipper actually changing size into the mini.
Yeah.
Right. So
awesome.
and I think the mini made it a little more approachable to a larger audience.
Yeah, and to be honest, so for me, I use my knives like as tools all day long, right? Working on whatever it is that I'm working on in my shop, my motorcycles, whatever. And this, for some reason, this is the size of knife that I'm always drawn to. Yeah. So this is, for me, this is mine. Like, this is the one I would go with. Good. So yeah, no, these are great. These are great. So we've kind of seen where you've come from. Right. So now where are we at? We teased at the beginning, so let's talk about this a little bit now.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, this is the Kwaiken Automatic.
Yeah.
It's so new, like I'm still kind of trying to like wrap my head around it a little bit. Last year, Carson invited me to a meeting at Blade and said he had a project that he wanted to talk to me about.
Carson with
Boker. Yeah. So basically, I get into the meeting and there's Dave from ProTech. Okay. The owner of ProTech.
Did you know he was going to be there?
No, at that point, like I think it was pretty nebulous as to what the meeting was.
So you're just walking into this.
Kind of walking in cold.
Yeah.
And basically, the idea gets presented for doing the Kwaiken as a U.S.-Made automatic.
Okay, yeah.
Where this is really fun for me is seeing that the Kwaiken was a strong enough performer for Boker to make the jump for them to take it to a project. Like for this, basically it's their first US-made automatic. And
awesome.
and if you're into autos at all, basically you know that autos are not allowed to be imported into the US. They have to be produced here.
Of course.
So it was a pretty big step. And it kind of refreshed the whole design for me because now I was having initial design conversations again with ProTech.
Right.
So it really felt like full circle.
It felt like coming right back to the original then.
Kind of, yeah. Like awesome. It was all starting over and I've never made an auto.
Right.
And so that process to me, if you're a knife guy, like you love everybody loves automatics.
Everybody loves
even if you don't carry one, they're really, really cool.
Yeah, like I don't carry an auto, but I love playing with autos.
Yeah, exactly. So it was exciting. And I think from a design standpoint, like when I think of an automatic, I think of like the traditional stilettos.
Right.
You know, that's kind of the shape that makes sense. These like kind kind of long, lean, aggressive shapes. And so I really think that the Kwaiken fits into that kind of historical like idea of an automatic.
Sure. Well, and one other thing that I would say about this design is it seems like you started with a fixed blade,
right.
And when you're talking about concealment, you're talking about
right.
a kimono in a belt loop, right? And then you go to the tab, you go to the flipper, you go to something smaller, and every time you're making these tweaks to make it a little more sleek, a little more design, a little more compact. This to me feels like what it's been striving for a little bit. I mean, is that how it feels to you?
In a way.
From the outside looking in, it's like this kind of seems that way, right?
Well, and it is because it's further simplifying the visual elements, right?
Okay, so further complicating the design again.
Yeah, exactly.
It's back and forth. Those visual elements.
Mechanism becomes more complicated, but the visuals become a little more streamlined. So now there's no flipper tab. We're back to the original kind of just clean linear design.
Totally.
And one thing that we did on this that I'm really happy with is we eliminated the lanyard hole.
Okay.
And we added a pin.
Okay, great. Yeah.
So basically, you're still able to add a lanyard, but now it's really at a perfect position.
Yeah.
It's hidden if you don't want to use it.
Right.
And it also allows us to situate the clip higher.
Cool.
Making the knife sit lower in your pocket.
Sit lower in the pocket.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's all just really small refinements.
Awesome. Let's get it close. Let's see. Make sure that we got that. I don't know if you guys can see, but there's that recess he's talking about right there. Hopefully it comes through for you. But really clean design. Really, really great. But yeah, awesome. Well, you got anything else about this auto that you want to tell the people out there on YouTube?
No, man. I mean, to be honest, the fun part about the Kwaiken is because of the timeline.
Right.
At this point, it speaks for itself. Like it's the Kwaiken.
Right. Yeah. Okay. No. Yeah. It's a thing.
With this, like, I'm excited to see what ProTech does with it as well.
Awesome.
They have the flexibility to do some really cool high-end finishes. They do inlay work. They do custom knives. I mean, they build custom projects.
Yeah.
And so I'm really hoping that people like this enough for this to kind of make it into their line enough to do that.
For sure.
So.
And now, where can people find this knife? Is it Boker ProTech Boker?
So basically, sales are going to be handled through Boker.
Yeah.
So they're going to do the distribution.
Right.
We wanted to do the co-branding because the work was so good. We wanted to give ProTech. I wanted their name on the blade. Like I wanted people to know the origin from manufacturer.
They touched it.
Yeah, and it's hard because the way that the knife industry works a lot of times. Like if you think about a custom knife maker, that means I'm making a knife in my shop. With production, a lot of times it's completely in-house production or it's OEM production.
Right.
And so with a project like this, it helps alleviate the confusion because it's basically OEM, ProTech building a product for Boker.
Cool.
So we wanted to give that credit.
Awesome. Yeah, and we will have those online at bladehq.com for you guys. I'm not sure on the release date just yet, but it'll be there. So, thanks for talking to us, thanks for sitting down.
Absolutely,
appreciate
man.
it.
Good talking to you
Giving
guys
us all
always.
the history. It was great. So, that's all that Lucas has got for us today, but that's not all Blade HQ has for you guys. We have got an entire playlist of SHOT Show 2018 videos. Make sure to check them out and find out what the latest and greatest is going to be this year.